Steve walked down the street, smiling happily. After all, today he had finally worked up the courage to ask an out on a weekend date, and is the girl of his dreams since his high school days. She has the unique ability to attract attention without words. Her eyes are a sea in which you can drown. They are so mysterious. You cannot immediately understand what color they are, green or blue. She can be gentle and smiling, kind and caring at the same time. The beautiful freckles on her face add to her childlike mystique, and is certainly a girl of character, her courage sometimes astonishing. After high school, they went to college together. Then they got a job at the same firm, she as an accountant, he as a manager. Today, while discussing some work issues, Steve had the courage to invite her to a cafe, and was silent for a minute and then smiled and agreed. When he got home, and all glowing with happiness, Steve quietly walked over to his mom, hugged and kissed her. "I see you are glowing with happiness. Will you share with me what you had going on?" his mom asked him, with a smile on her face. "Mom, I asked an out this weekend today, on a date, and she said yes," Steve replied. His mom stopped smiling and turned away from him. Steve noticed that she was wiping away her tears with trembling fingers. Steve was puzzled, upset by her reaction. "Mom, what's wrong? What's going on? I don't understand your mood swings. I thought you were going to be cheerful." "You know I've liked him for a long time," Steve said. "I'm sorry, son. I realize I'm not acting right. I'm really happy for you. But maybe you shouldn't go out with him," Mom replied quietly. "Explain the reason why I shouldn't go out with her." "I didn't expect this from you, Mom. You've always supported me in everything. What's wrong now?" "I don't want to talk anymore. This conversation is over," Steve replied. Mom wanted to say something to him, but Steve turned and went to his room. Then he changed his clothes and left the house. His mood was ruined. He decided to walk the streets of the city. Inside, everything was boiling with anger at his mom. After all, she was the only person he loved with all his heart. She was his friend. With Mom, he could share all his joys and sorrows. With her, it was possible to solve any problem. She gave hints in difficult situations. She was always on Steve's side. But with his father, it was a different story. It always seemed to Steve that with his father, he caused only a feeling of disappointment, misunderstanding, whatever Steve did. His father was too hard on him. They never had any emotional intimacy. As Steve got older, this only exacerbated the relationship and began to lead to conflict. Steve loved his father very much, but there was never any understanding between them. Then his father became ill. All the burdens of his care fell on Mom. Just before his death, his father apologized to Steve, saying that he was wrong and that despite everything, he always loved him very much. Of course, Steve never resented his father because his mom was there to comfort Steve and justify his father's actions. Today, Steve didn't understand his mom's reaction. After wandering around town some more, Steve returned home. His feelings were strong, but he also didn't want a conflict with his mom. He decided they needed to talk. Mom was in the living room and he walked over to her and quietly said, "Mom, I understand that you are concerned about my life and my decisions, but I'm an adult now and I can take responsibility for myself. And really likes me, and I like her, and I want to be with her. I hope you can understand and support me." Mom looked at him, hugged him, and said, "Steve, You know how much I love you. I'm begging you, give me time and I'll explain everything to you. This is very hard for me to decide to do this. I hope you will understand me. Okay, Mom, we'll talk some other time, Steve answered her. Steve, please help me get my stuff down from the attic tomorrow. If put things in order up there, put everything in boxes. The trash needs to go downstairs and be thrown out, Mom asked. Yes, Mom, I'll come home from work tomorrow and I'll do it all, Steve replied. The next day, Steve went up to the attic. Mom had put it in perfect order. All Steve had to do was bring the boxes of junk downstairs. Taking a large box in his hands, Steve headed for the stairs as suddenly the bottom of the box opened and all the contents fell out onto the floor. Steve swore involuntarily and, dropping the box to the floor, began to pick up the contents. In his hands he found a small box in which there were wedding photos tied with a thin cord. In the first picture, Steve saw the young father as a groom, and next to him the bride, who looked nothing like her mother. Steve untied the shoelace and revisited the photos. His father and another woman, clearly not his mom, were looking at him from the pictures. Steve took the pictures and went down to the first floor to see his mom. He found her in the kitchen. Steve held out the pictures to his mom and said, "Mom, did Dad have another family? There's a bride in the picture. That's not you. Who is it then?" "For some reason you didn't tell me anything," Steve asked. With a sigh, Mom sank down in her chair and said, "Now that it's come to this, and you've found the pictures, it's probably time to tell you everything. I was hoping to prepare you for this, but it just so happened that you found out sooner. I didn't want you to feel cheated. I always wanted the best for you. You will always be the dearest person in this world to me, despite all this complicated history. I love you like a son, and nothing can change the way I feel about you. Steve, I'm not your mom. In this wedding picture, your real mom." "Mom, I don't understand you," Steve said with surprise in his voice. "Please explain." "Okay, Steve," Mom replied quietly. "I'll explain everything to you, but don't interrupt me." Steve sat down next to Mom and hugged her. Mom cuddled up to him and cried. Then she took a drink of water and began to tell him, "That's your real mother in the wedding picture. She was your father's first wife. She died during childbirth. Your father picked you up from the maternity hospital and started taking care of you. And then he met me and we started seeing each other. And in one of the meetings he confessed to me that he had a little son. I also confessed to him that I couldn't have children. Nevertheless, he married me. As soon as I saw you, I loved you and accepted you as my child. I never felt any difference and I always loved you with all my heart. Your father was a wonderful man and he loved you very much. But there was an incident that changed everything. One day a man came to see us and said he had a very urgent matter to discuss with us. Dad let him into the house. The man introduced himself and said his name was John. Much to your father's surprise, he took out of his wallet a picture of two people embracing, your real mother and this man. Then he told his father that they were lovers, and they were careful to hide it. But then they broke up. The man admitted it was because of his illness. The thing is, he had a mental illness. Your mother somehow found out. But he wasn't a danger to society, and he was treated every year. But your mother, as soon as she found out, she stopped talking to him. She never wanted to hear from him again. The man felt it was his duty to inform your father that you might be his son. and that you should be tested to see if you'd inherited any mental illness. You were tested, but nothing was found. The illness could come out at any time, so every year when you were little you were examined by a psychiatrist. You didn't have any illness. Your father hated your mother. He thought she was a liar and a traitor. And then he passed that hatred on to you. You became very much like your mother, and he hated you more and more every year. I tried to protect you as much as I could, but I couldn't fix my dad. And then my dad got sick and he had to be tested. And at that point, he decided to get a paternity test. Your father asked for 2 copies, one he sent to this man and one he kept for himself. But he never opened it. He continued to believe that you weren't his son. This envelope is in my possession. I have never opened it all this time, and I still think of you as my son. I have no one else but you. I'm very happy that you're going out with Anne. She's a good girl. But the psychiatrist said it's possible that the disease could manifest itself in your children. So I was afraid for you. The envelope is in my room. Take it from the bedside table and read the results. Just remember, whatever the result, I will always love you. Steve was amazed at what he heard. That was why his father had behaved so toward him. But what was Steve's fault? He got up with difficulty and went to his mother's room. He took an envelope from the nightstand. Doubts tormented him as to what would happen if he were the man's son, whether Anne would agree to go out with him. But he decided that whatever it was, he was ready for anything. And within he would explain himself. Taking the envelope, he went to his mother. "Mom, I can't open it. Help me open it and tell me the result," Steve asked. "Of course, my son," said Mom, and took the envelope. After opening the envelope and reading the result, she smiled and hugged Steve. Steve also took the result in his hands and read it. The result of the test said that the biological father was his father and not another man. Steve was beyond happy. He hugged his mom and said, "I wish my father had opened that envelope himself and made sure I was his real son. Mom, thank you for everything you have done for me. Thank you for always being there for me. You're my real mom. I love you very much."